Dog, who's also on the commission, is the one that asked me to moderate, and we chatted a lot about what it meant to have our Lakota, well, we're both Lakota, but having our Lakota and Indigenous identities come first. And oftentimes that's a struggle in the Two-Spirit community. And I know Kenny and I have had these conversations as well. So we really just wanted to have a conversation about the cultural components of what it means to be a part of these communities, and how we are balancing that in our lives. So I am going to pass it along to Kenny. He'll give us a little bit of background about himself, and then introduce us to quickly, because I know has had lots to say about this, but about this Two-Spirit identity, and that's one thing we'll address from a cultural perspective with the panelists. So, Kenny?
Okay. Oh my gosh, let me get my microphone. Halka memu temenue inyach Kenny Ramos we ichahi inyanue we ichahi benegus neapuma Welch Questamak Barona Indian Reservation Kupai. Hello everyone, my name is Kenny Ramos. I'm Digenyo-I Kumiai from the Barona Band of Mission Indians. I grew up and live on the Barona Indian Reservation, which is in East San Diego County. And yes, and welcome to the Two-Spirit panel, everybody. And I am an alumni of UCLA. I graduated with a BA in American Indian Studies in 2013, after which I worked for the Red Circle Project at APLA Health and Wellness, which is LA County's, yes, I know, RCP in the house. We have current prevention training specialist and former boss. Hey, Michelle, nice to see you, girl. Yes, yes. She was my boss. We worked a lot together back in the day. It wasn't that long back in the day, though. But anyway, so yes, so that's LA County's only sexual health program targeting American Indian, gay, Two-Spirit men and transgender individuals, specifically focusing on HIV prevention and education. After that, I worked at UCLA managing the American Indian Retention Program that is there. And then I transitioned into my new career as an actor. I'm a member of the Artist Ensemble at Native Voices at the Autry. I sit on the Community Advisory Board for Red Circle Project still. I also work at contract with the United American Indian Involvement as a Gathering of Native Americans wellness curriculum facilitator. And I'm involved at home on my reservation with language revitalization efforts on my reservation and at the Kumiai Community College, which is a tribal-operated college in San Diego. And I also volunteer with the Barona Circle of Elders. That's my favorite thing to do because we play chair volleyball. And I also volunteer with All Tribes in Recovery on Sequan Indian Reservation and the Rainbow of Truth on the La Jolla Indian Reservation, which that is actually a Two-Spirit group convening of representatives from the different Indian reservations in San Diego. And this past year, we organized the first Two-Spirit tribal contingent in the San Diego Pride Parade to have Native presence. And we're also working on reincorporating what it means to be, in my culture, Ipaisla in our tribal communities, which also suffer from, generations of intergenerational trauma, but also colonization from the Spanish mission system to the Mexican Rancho period and California Indian slavery, which was, paid for by California and reimbursed by the United States government. Anyway, I don't know if I got a little off track there, but that's a little bit about me, and I'm looking forward to this talk, and thank you all for coming, and I'll just pass it off. It's okay.
Okay. All right, guys. I'm actually going to live this a little bit because I am a starving artist, and the more people I can reach to buy my stuff, I love that. No, I'm just kidding, but not really. Not really. No, I just love reaching the fact that today is Indigenous Peoples Day, and y'all are here. It's amazing. The Creator has blessed us all today, and I woke up this morning exhausted because we were at the Indigenous Pride LA yesterday, which was fabulous. Oh my God, I had such a great day. And actually, this is my dog. So I have a dog here. Sorry, guys. She would like to speak on my behalf. Good. Okay. So I'll put her away. So yeah, Sego Zewagwego. My name is Kit Thomas. I am a mixed media artist from Akwesasne, which you're probably like, where's that? Well, let me tell you, Akwesasne is actually in a far-off land called Canada and upstate New York. The territories actually they straddle two different provinces, so Ontario and Quebec, and then upstate New York. And I was born in upstate New York, but I have dual citizenship, which means if Orange Face is still around, I can jump into the next country very easily. But I kid, but not really. So yeah, like I'm going to probably talk. Should I actually begin my discussion here? Okay. I just figured I'd introduce myself first, and then. So yeah, I'm actually an artist. I am Iroquois, Haudenosaunee, Mohawk, Ganyageha. I am Wolf Clan. I haven't always lived on the reservation. Since I could walk, I was a wanderer, and so was my mother. So we ventured off, and I've lived all places. I've gotten to meet so many different tribes, so many different nations, which is great because now I have stories to pass along, and now I'm here talking to you guys, and that's another story for when I move to the next state probably. So yeah, I wanted to actually talk about the subject of the Haudenosaunee people, that's Iroquois. Basically, I want to talk about the rites of passage. I'm not sure if every tribe has that. It's basically when the teenage girls go through their rites of passage, the teenage boys go through their rites of passage to become young women and young men. So they're kind of taken along, they're mentored. This actually wasn't like traditionally existing. About 16 to 18 years ago, I believe, a group of knowledge holders and elders and clan mothers got together because they realized that the young people needed more of a path to follow. They realized that mental health was going, a lot of kids were getting involved in drugs and alcohol, and that was setting a spiral of spiraling down mentally. Their health, everything was being affected, diabetes, etc., etc. So they formed the Ohero, which basically is the rites of passage. Kids are mentored by their aunties or uncles. They go into the woods. They're taught how to take care of themselves and build little camps, but also they go through a fasting process. So 4 days later, they come out. It's actually a 4-year program, too. So these young kids have to commit themselves for 4 years. I mean, when I was 16, the only thing I could commit myself was maybe listening to the entire Atlanta CD back in 1996. So these kids are amazing, and in a way, I wish I went through that, but at the same time, I was very confused in my culture because in the longhouse, the longhouse is actually basically psychologically, it's our traditions, it's our customs, and it's also literally a longhouse. That's basically what your families stayed in, cousins. Back in the day, you had cousins. But for me, when I went home recently in 2015, it was hard for me because I was very out. But you have to go through one of two doors. You either go through the boy side, or the male side, or the female side. And I, out of respect, I went through the female side. I have to wear a skirt. You're supposed to follow those traditions. And it's not like I didn't feel comfortable in a skirt, because I could totally rock a skirt too. But it was just the feeling that I got when I was young again. I felt a little out of balance, because for me, I embrace, as a two-spirit, I embrace the energies. I really like the fact that, some days, right now I feel a lot of masculine energy, but still the feminine side. And then, a couple years ago, I was very feminine, and, I embrace that. It's just, I think that's what two spirits being about, is just embracing, just be who you are. Just be who you are. So, for me, I definitely wanted to respect my culture, respect what I wanted to honor the past. I definitely wanted to follow customs and respect my people. So I did. I wore the long skirt. I went through actually 2 sweats. That's some tough stuff, and you really find you find out more about yourself. So I see what these kids they're going through, and I applaud them. Because at that age, I wasn't even quite sure, like me, if I was trans or if I was just a lesbian or what. I didn't know what to choose. I didn't know what I was. So having me walk through a specific door at that age was very difficult. But yeah, so that's pretty much it. I think what I wanted to jump upon is just really rites of passage, and for my culture, the Iroquois, the Haudenosaunee, I totally respect it. But the creators actually of Ohero, they mention that they're constantly evolving. Like people are coming to Cuitlahuac and taking this actual program and going to other another res or the res they came from and actually building it. And it's great too because it's keeping these kids on a good path, good mind, sound mind. And they mentioned that it's always evolving. So I wonder, is it going to evolve for the LGBTQ? Is it just they're unaware of the LGBTQ in my community? Yes, they're slowly coming around. But it's great now. There's programs. When I went home, I felt honored because they asked me to speak in front of multiple classes and organizations and programs just about my travels and my experiences. So I think that's basically what I wanted to touch upon is like a combination of honoring the past but still evolving to the future. All right, thank you. Thanks, guys. And, yeah. Oh, in my culture, in my language, Nyamagoa. So, thank you.
Piali, nanotoka Cuitlahuac, Juan Notzonquisca Arreola Martinez, Nani Huatlamachtiquetl, Ipa Antamba Tlali. So what I just said is my name is Cuitlahuac and my last name is Arreola Martinez. I'm a Nahuatl teacher on Tonga land. And I'm a part of a Nahuatl study group called Tlachtoltapasoli, from Tlachtoli, which means language, and Tapasoli means nest. We teach and study Nahuatl every single Sunday at La Plaza de Cultura y Artes, which is kind of down the street. And in terms of identifying, I would identify myself as same gender living. I always knew that I was, different as a little boy. And I like to promote not only just Indigenous events, I like to promote our Two-Spirit and LGBTQ events via Facebook or Instagram. And I also like to bring up dialogue within my Instagram to talk about the gender roles and how to navigate through spaces as far as being, also like going back to my roots. So right now, I consider myself Indigenous, of Indigenous mixed background. But right now, I am going back to my roots. I identify as Indigenous, and as far as going back to what tribes, it would be Coyuteco and Nahua and Totorames. So I'm using language to bring back to bring back our roots, because a lot of Mexicans do not identify as Indigenous, and I want them to feel proud of their Indigenous background through language. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Ya't Shea Marlon Footracer Nishya, Duhai Glini Nishla, Hunagani Bashishin, Kintlichi A Dishnella. Hello, Ya't in our language translates to everything is beautiful beneath the heavens. And what a momentous day that we were all here. Over a year ago on August 30th, this city council voted to acknowledge and replace Indigenous Peoples Day from Columbus Day. And I know that many of the people here were in support of that. And I just want to acknowledge the work that you had done before and after this day, and then even moving forward, the work that you all continue to do. Just thank you to Councilmember Mitchell Farrell for creating this space for us, and also the Pride event that was mentioned earlier. Also, thank you for the Indigenous Peoples Council. And specifically for me, I am originally from a town called Sesana, which means rock that sits there, also known as Lupton, Arizona, on the reservation in Arizona. I am a graduate of Stanford University. I majored in poetry writing, and specifically in creative writing and playwriting. But I currently now am the administrative coordinator for the Tribal Law and Policy Institute. And I'm very grateful to be a guest here on Tongva land. And I'm very grateful for all the work that all the panelists do in their respective communities, and just really acknowledge everyone here and look forward to the lively discussion.
Hi everybody, my name is Terri. Yad Terri Jane Shlan Kintlachini, Jantwodajini Shlan Kintlachini Bachachin, Hudal Yad Danan Shlan. My name is Terri, I am Navajo, and this is how I identify myself. And I do apologize for really coming in late, and that should not be, but Navajos are always late. For me, that is. It was really a journey just to get from the other side to this side. So I just want to say thank you to everybody, all the panel members, thank you. And, for me it is thank you to all the council members, and thank you to all the city and everybody, for the people in the city of LA to really take part in this People's Indigenous Day. So hopefully, I'm not sure if that was part of the introduction. I'm with APIT, that is the Asian Pacific AIDS Intervention Team. I am the program coordinator. I overlook 5 different programs. And also part of the co-chair for the underserved cultural communities under the Department of Mental Health, and also a UCLA Extension graduate. And I think that's one of the most important things, is just being part of the I served 2 years on the history of LA's Transgender Advisory Council, so I finished my term, so I just wanted to be able to kind of like shed light on that. I represented the Native American communities, specifically for trans Native, so that's just pretty much about it.
Thank you. So I just want to quickly circle back around to Kenny. We've heard a little bit of where everyone's coming from culturally, but can you, for those of us that might not know, just define where this concept of Two-Spirit came from? And then I have a more broader question for our panelists.
So the term Two-Spirit originated at a Native LGBT conference in Winnipeg, I believe in 1992. I don't know the year, but and for me, it very much is a political identifier of the intersection of Indigenous and non-heteronormative identities. Oftentimes, I think the term gets appropriated and gets conflated with these meanings of all these different meanings, but really what I believe it goes down to is it's a step in us wanting to, Native people, in really looking back into our distinct tribal languages and cultures and finding what that non-heteronormative identity or that third gender or what that culturally specific role was in our prospective communities. So Two-Spirit to me is still a colonial kind of umbrella term that isn't an end-all be-all. It just represents the intersection of these two oppressed identities, being Indigenous and being non-heteronormative in the dominant culture, which is founded on white patriarchy. So that's just sharing, I guess, my understanding of that term.
So, and we heard a little bit from Kit and Kui about just the importance of language and where these concepts or these terms are specifically in our own communities. And I know Two-Spirit for Lakota people, generally we use the word Wink Day, which is that idea of you embodying both the female and male spirit within yourself. But I know that looks different for other communities, and I'm looking at my Navajos at the end of the table over here. If you can, both of you can just comment on what, from a cultural perspective, what that looks like in your community, which differs from, Haudenosaunee or Ipais or Lakotas.
So in our language, it's actually all identities are spiritual identities, and that we are spirits with bodies, and that we are entrusted to interact with the physical world that maintains your spiritual identity. And in using any type of terminology, that it first acknowledges that spiritual energy. And for us, the term for two-spirit or I identify as omnigendered, which is I use all the pronouns and I can answer to anything. Because language is clumsy, it's human. But in our culture, it is a term that is reference to our most sacred female deity, which is a white shell woman. And when you invoke the name of a two-spirit person, you're actually enacting and calling on that female deity. So that comes into play for our respect in traditional society. In our creation stories, there is a portion where we actually do save the world. I don't think the first fall of snow has happened back home, and that knowledge is sacred and only be shared with other Navajos. And to expand it more in a contemporary term, it's a reclamation against Anglophone culture, settler colonial Anglophone culture, in which native languages aren't being recognized, which is why we have our community members doing language revitalization. And for us, that is something that's a spiritual one. I know that there are some traditional Navajos who forbid you from saying the word because it's so sacred. But for us, for me personally, it's something that I've developed as a child from picking up pieces of stories from other community members. It's always been your auntie's roommate, or it's been your uncle's friend, all this clandestine language. But now with community members here who, not just for LGBT two-spirit communities are doing work, but general community work for all Indigenous people, you can reveal those systems of knowledge, not only focused in language, but also science and art and poetry. So that's just a little bit from my personal understanding. And I'm only one Navajo, and I only speak from my own experience.
Thank you so much. And my personal lived experience as being a Navajo trans woman, being born and raised on the Navajo reservation, specifically with the Shiprock in New Mexico, and also part of my extended grandparents are also originally from Lupton and Hawk, Arizona. But for me, my lived experience as a Navajo trans woman, I was sharing this with somebody earlier, my first 18 years living on a Navajo reservation was pretty much for me that having to be at a place as both genders, encompassing both female and male genders, having that experience. And I think that's really important for me is that getting as much knowledge and skills from my grandparents and also with my parents, having to do the home cooking skills, all the female stuff. And then with the male stuff, it's about learning how to chop woods, right? You can see me with an axe and chopping woods. So having those both genders, and I think that's really important. Not only that, but having those lived experience in both genders as a nurturer and as a healer. And I think that's very important within the community, not just in the family itself, but in the community, having to really kind of like balance on both genders with the female and the male. And that was part of my lived experience, and having to be motivated to really kind of like take that life skills and coming to the city of LA. I lived in LA since 1987. I've taken my cultural experience and my traditional values, having that to live here in the city of LA. So I think that's really important to really carry that tradition and having those like ceremonial practices, the prayers and the blessings on a daily basis. And I think that's very important for me, is that having both genders, it really kind of like balances out having to live here in the city of LA, and having to also be part of the community is very important, because I also, not only with the agency that I work with, but I'm a facilitator, and being a certified addiction specialist, having to create a group setting environment specifically for Two-Spirits, meaning both Native and Indigenous in the city of LA in a diverse community. I facilitate a group called Circle of Healing. It is really a place of cultural awareness and cultural education on spirit aspects. So I think that's really important to really share that on a community and also on an individual level.
So I am going to ask one question, and for all the panelists to answer, and then we'll open it up. We're only in here till 2:45, so we don't have a lot of time. But and I just kind of coming off of what you were saying, Terri, about supporting these spaces and bringing our traditional skills and knowledge with us wherever we go. I would just ask you all, what advice or what things would you tell allies and community how to support? So both our cultural communities, right? How do they support Two-Spirit communities? And then vice versa, how does the LGBT community support us as cultural people? So if you want to tackle either question, I open it up. Whoever would like to start, just advice. How to be a supportive community.
I'm going to go ahead and jump on it. As an individual, for myself, I think that the responsibility on my part for for the Two-Spirit community, for Indigenous, is that not only myself, but also another Two-Spirit individual, having a story to take place last year in the year 2017 was that, since this is the day that's in recognizing for People's Indigenous Day, the question came up, has there ever been a place for Two-Spirit Indigenous, a pride for them to really create a place of cultural awareness and traditional values as far as educating and forming communities? So that conversation, the dialogue took place with another individual. Okay, this is going to be our very first one for our Two-Spirit Indigenous pride. So with that, and I think that what came out of it is that with a lot of planning and with the help of the council district, with the staff, with Mitchell Farrell, and with the planning committee members, is that we had created our very first Indigenous Pride LA 2018, and it was held yesterday at Barnstall Art Park. I think this was at a launching place of coming together of all Two-Spirit communities, celebrating their heritage and their traditional values. And yesterday was a very successful event, having to see a lot of Indigenous Two-Spirit individuals really kind of like come out in their regalias and come out with prayers and blessing, really a place to like really signify our very first Indigenous Pride LA. So I'm here to promote, check us out, follow us on Indigenous Pride LA for next year.
Okay. So I created a list of Indigenous future, and I'll just read a couple of the things that I listed. All Native nonprofits hire at least one Two-Spirit person. We all know the words for our Two-Spirit folk in all our languages. We know the name of the people whose land we're on. We elect a trans president. We write queer comic books. We write children's books that have trans and LGBT characters in them. We promote and proclaim all Indigenous space as breastfeeding safe space. We respect and restore the fear and respect to our Two-Spirit medicine community. All law enforcement are required to use their cultural and gender sensitivity training. We build monuments and bless them dedicated to our water protectors, those who watch the border, our missing and murdered Indigenous women. We restore honor back to the position of holding a political position. We love fiercely, especially ourselves, and we truly see each other.
Oh,
That's the answer.
that
There's
was
nothing
good.
else to say.
Should.
Yeah, for real. Yeah.
List.
Ditto, Marlon. Did everyone write that down?
Wow.
Did
I
you
know.
all get
I was
that?
trying to write fiercely up
Right.
here. Anyone else like to add how to be supportive of our multiple communities?
I might just.
Oh,
No,
go ahead.
you.
Go ahead.
You go.
We'll just come down the line.
Fine. Yeah, you first.
I think that we should, as LGBTQ or Two-Spirit individuals, should be able to educate other individuals on the terms. Also to be, we live in a heteronormative society, so it's just like, you're born a man, so then you are to be masculine, and then you are to be with the woman, right? And vice versa. I think that when there's issues of, racism and also issues of, being against LGBTQ and Two-Spirit individuals, it's a moment for us to educate them as well, and I mean, in any space, whether it be on Facebook, whether it be in person, at the workplace, in the classroom, that's my thoughts.
All right. I guess I'm the queerest of the queers. I go last. So what I think is maybe, see, on my reservation, what's great is there's new programs. I think it's fabulous that there's a lot more mental health programs, a lot more programs to help with placing domestic violence victims and so on. I think what a lot of kids are doing now is pushing the buttons, and I love that. So there's these young kids, they're coming out earlier and earlier. I'm so jealous because they come out like 12 and I waited till 18. But it's because I didn't have the resources or the knowledge of where to go or where to feel comfortable. Nowadays they're creating safe spaces and almost like places for kids to go after school. And I think that's great too. It's almost, I think a lot of the queer kids in my community too are pushing the envelope too because they want to be heard, they want to be identified correctly. But a lot of the people and the elders, they don't know the correct terms. My grandmother still references my gayness as, she's like, you remind me of that Ellen DeGeneres lady. And I was like, what, because I'm queer? And she's like, no, you're funny. And that, yeah, okay. But yeah, the young kids now are actually, taking pamphlets that they download off like online resources and bringing it to their guidance counselor, bringing it to the, we have I don't know if it's still running, but there was a place called Safe Zone in Cuitlahuac. I really hope that they continue with that because, there's young kids that need that stability of a place to go or to be heard. And there's a lot of allies too. I found a lot of allies just to be there to support the kids because they want us to have like good mental health, good mind. And I think that's brilliant. I love that. Okay, that's me.
Well, there was two things that, again, Marlon said that really stood out to me, and I guess wanting to share these resources. But one was coming back to land and acknowledging and remembering where we are. And there is this website, this Indigenous land app. I wish we and here it is, Native Land. And you can actually look it up, and it will show you whose traditional homelands you are on, anywhere in the country, and also the treaties and different policies that were passed that ceded that land or didn't cede that land. Basically the historical policies that affect that land and allow you essentially to stand there today. So there's a resource for that, and also Red Circle Project on their website had a compilation of the equivalent of Two-Spirit identifying terms in I want to say over 100 tribal tribal groups and their linguistic term for a third gender or two-spirit equivalent. So those are resources online for everyone to know, so you could get started on Marlon's list and know about land and know about our cultural understandings for what it means to be in the third gender or non-heteronormative identity.
Well, thank you. Also, I just wanted to introduce Councilman Mitchell Farrell.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to make it down here really quick and thank everyone for participating. I want to thank the wonderful panel that you just heard from, and I want to thank Indigenous Pride for sponsoring this panel. Thank you so much. We've been living with the persecution culture since the Puritans, and it's time to bring that to an end, because when they arrived and colonization began, the persecution culture didn't really exist in Native America. I'm not saying it was perfect. I'm not saying it was heaven on earth, but that certainly did not exist until the westward expansion. So there's a lot to learn, a lot to appreciate, and I want to thank all of you for sharing your experiences and your perspectives, because it's how we all grow. And this is all being Facebook Lived, all of these discussions all day long. We're reaching larger populations who are going to have a better understanding because of this. And that's what Indigenous Peoples Day is all about. So enjoy the rest of the day, and thank you.
I know. I'm like, can we get a picture with you before you leave? So we're almost out of time, but I think we can at least squeeze in at least one question or a comment right here come to you.
Hi, something that you all said that really resonated with me and brought up a question in my mind, which is like your cultural identity comes first. I'm a queer Palestinian, and I often go into spaces and have to defend myself. And I know that this is not just, Palestinians who deal with this, a lot of Indigenous folks also deal with this. So how do you participate and engage in queer spaces with your cultural identity being the first thing that's important to you? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And it's something this is something Clementine and I always talk about, because that was my experience a lot, especially as an undergraduate and getting involved with LGBT spaces that still seem to approach gender and sexual orientation and sexuality from a colonial standpoint. So when I would come in as a Native person, as an Indigenous person, and that cultural understanding of myself and my connection to my homelands, when that came forefront for me, that didn't necessarily go over well with them, because it needed to be no, we're the Queer Alliance, and this is about fighting for X, Y, and Z. But for me, it always come back to the land and representing my people and what it meant, what that meant. That was really took precedence for me as a Native person, and that's just kind of how my identity, and I think maybe a lot of Indigenous people's identities, two-spirit identities, operate. And yeah, it's a challenge, and I'm not really sure how to solve it, other than finding I guess continuing to take up space and finding allies that and other Native people to take up that space with you, and that will understand that. And I think we're having to educate our communities about us and try to create a more accepting understanding of our identities. Yeah, Marlon. Take it away, Marlon.
So a term that I recently come to know is possibility models, which comes from the trans community, and that is where you see a body in a specific performance, whether it's on the news, the comic books I'd mentioned earlier, as a leadership at a local community chapter house back home, and that you know that you're the first of something, and that because you're the first of something that you have value, and that when we get strength from our other communities, that we know that we belong in that space. So whether it's sitting under the lights at LA City Hall, whether it's in a community classroom, whether it's standing on a figurative and literal border, whether it's dismantling oppressive rules like dismantling of ICWA from this past week, whether it's listening to other women telling their stories about dangers to their body, know that there is always an equal, if not greater force than oppression, than systems of erasure. And that spiritual fortitude, whatever it is for you, your tools of resiliency is the one that you carry for yourself and people for the future.
Yeah. Do we have time? Yeah. Okay. I don't know if I mentioned it before because everyone was saying their pronouns and such. I go by she, her. But literally, I was just referenced as sir in the hall because I didn't have my dog on a leash. But you know, I've gotten it my entire life. So sometimes when I write a bio, that's the hardest thing, writing a bio. It's hard about yourself, but as an artist, you have to learn how to do it. So I never know whether to put Indigenous first or LGBTQ first. It's like, who am I, or what am I? You know, it's kind of, it's nice though. I'm just me, truthfully. But sometimes you have to put it into words for other people. I think us as Indigenous people, we were given a great responsibility. If we like it or not, we are here. The Creator made us. We stand for so many things of the past, the present, and now the future. I mean, like, I'm from New York, and I've been in LA since January, and to see the amount of people here, it's mind-boggling. You ever watch Will Farrell? Mind-boggling, when your thoughts are all over. And, okay, never mind. Sorry, guys. Okay, so let's cut to the choice. But yeah, I think it's a great responsibility on both halves because I'm proud to be gay. I identify as a lesbian, and I'm like, what's that? That's old school terms. It really is. When I grew up, it was either a butch lesbian or a lipstick lesbian, and I didn't even fit in with that. I was like, good golly, I was a little Punky Brewster. But that's it for me. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. So we are out of time, and I also want to be mindful of Mitchell Farrell's time. But I also wanted to add, I think, and just echoing our panelists, as Native bodies, we are constantly politicized as Native first. And so for me, that's always been the front identity. Like, I was on a panel on Friday, and I ended up saying I'm hella Lakota, and I was like, oh God, my West Coast is coming out. But it's true. Like, even as within this framework of indigeneity, like, I am Lakota first. I will always be Lakota first, and everything else that comes after is a reflection of the values that I was raised with. And I think for some broader LGBT folks, that's their first time being politicized, is being queer. But as a Native person, we're politicized coming out of the womb. And so that's one thing that's really important about the celebration of this day, right? We get to celebrate just being who we are always, but we get to do that together and in everyone's faces. Like, yes, I'm going to close down the street for my 5K, and yes, Redbone's going to perform tonight. You know, like that, those are the spaces that we're taking up as Native bodies. And that's really, I think, for a lot of us, what we carry with us constantly. And the intersection of all the other identities is just the happy burden that we carry because we are the first people of this land. So thank you all. I hope you welcome and congratulate our panelists and enjoy the rest of the day.
Public doesn't see with its automation system how we can control the